Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Peter Robinson. This is the Ethereum Engineering Group meetup. And today we have Andreas and he's going to talk about L2 standardization. So Andreas, before you share your slides, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So, Andreas Freund, I have been in the blockchain space since 2014. Actually did run a node on Olympic. That was fun. Only shortly, but it was fun. Um, my moniker is the blockchain Swiss Army knife. Head of technology of the global blockchain practice at other consultancy services at one point, then at Consensus. Now I was 3 startups. Now there's my third one is Interweave Technologies, where we're providing multi-enterprise ERP solutions to telco companies using privacy enhanced layer 2s over public Ethereum. Before that, it was Tree Trunk. I am working across the entire stack. So both from an infrastructure point of view, so involved with companies that work on ZK hardware, for example, to protocols, to applications, dApps, decentralized governance, decentralized like tokenomics, as well as legal and regulatory questions. So I'm covering the entire spectrum, and also have my own company where I provide advisory services, EXP technology consultants. So as part of that, I am co-chair of the Ethereum Open Project community layer 2 standardization working group that's managed by and supported by OASIS. So I will actually start sharing my slides because that's where things start. So do that. So, just set that. So, why do we need a formal or why do we need formal standards for L2? 4 primary points. Number 1, facilitate discussions between L2 projects, developers, and other interested parties, such as enterprises. So that is where the long-term money is, unless you bank on your pump and dump coins. That's true. It's like the enterprises will be the primary users of L2s if that is actually going to stay a thing, because they perfectly suit enterprise requirements once you look at it a little bit more closely. So that's one. The second is to promote interoperability and better alignment across the L2 ecosystem, which is highly fractured. Also very important, especially for enterprises and governments, they're more comfortable adopting new technology when they're based on formal standards developed by respected standard bodies, i.e. TFW3C, OASIS, and so forth. So that's the 4th point. So hence OASIS. And the last point is to level up on quality of standards and specifications in the Ethereum ecosystem, which is really needed. Getting better, yet it's still by far not there at the level of like an OASIS W3C or ISO. So this is where we're trying to take the work that the group is doing, which means there's a lot more work that needs to be done from a standards point of view than what, for example, EIPs are required to contain. They're improving. They're getting better. Not going to rat on them. They're wonderful. They're wonderful people. It's just needs to take more. Needs to be a higher quality. But we're getting there. So so then the question is like, then wait, or like why Ethereum community projects managed by OASIS, right? Number one, OASIS is a storied nonprofit technical standards body that was formed in 1993. So like SAML standard and everything they did. So there is a lot of prestige that is that enterprises recognize, and behind that, then we can do it in open source and standards development, and that is also important. Not only open source, but that we have open source standards and their respective reference implementation. And so this, I know OASIS open project for Ethereum related work was started in 2019 by the Ethereum Foundation, Consensus, and the EA. It has low bureaucracy and flexible standards processes. A lot more rigid than an EIP process or an RIP process, but significantly less so than, for example, a W3C. So why? So we have that's the why. It has a, you have a well-known name that knows how to do open source. You have some good support at startup, and you are creating you're trying to interpolate between W3C and an EIP. So to get there. So that's why, and this was possible within this context of an OASIS within the OASIS community project. So there are multiple community projects. The Ethereum one is only one of them. The key focus is enterprise friendly, but inclusive of the entire Ethereum community. So participants that we have in the working group are MetaLab, we have Arbitrum, Off-Chain Labs, Optimism, Metis, Scroll, Linea, Accenture, ENY, Polygon, the EA Cross-Chain Working Group, and a few more. So you can see it's a big mix, and that's exactly how it's desired to be. So what's the scope? So 4 items. So identify the most relevant use cases and business requirements for layer 2. Number 2 is develop the technical layer 2 standards for both ecosystem and enterprise requirements with a focus on interoperability. 3 is how to tackle layer 2 specific challenges such as MEV concentration, like MEV, TVL concentration, etc., within the scope of layer 2s. And then last is identify characteristics of layer 2 blockchain environments that are key to address mainstream and enterprise adoption. So the group has been mainly focused on the second one, because those were the lowest hanging fruit. That brings me actually to the standards development approach. So it was find ecosystem relevant topics with an eye towards the enterprise. Number 1. Number 2, what are the low hanging fruit? Right, we'll tackle those first. And then 3rd, standards must be small in scope to iterate and finish quickly. Because the standards process can be 1.5 years, 2 years, 3 years. So the point is, let's create like, small scope, and then finish it quickly, iterate, and then get it out and try to get reference implementation. So that's the development, standards development approach. So let me pause here for a second. Any questions up to this point?
Sure. If no one else has got a question, you mentioned the EIP and RIP process, and OASIS, and so when would it be appropriate for a standard to be being, say, standardized, or something to be standardized in OASIS group rather than, say, via an RIP? Or would you aim to more formally standardize something that's already an RIP in OASIS? How would that work, do you think?
So currently what we're doing, we are actually, so we're going the other way. We're going not RIP, EIP to OASIS standard. We're taking OASIS standard, and then we're creating EIPs. So I'll talk about that in a second.
Oh, okay.
But we can also take EIPs or RIPs and work them into a more formal standard. There currently was enough low-hanging fruit on stuff that had not been addressed by RIPs and EIPs that we didn't have to look at that. And there's probably enough to do for the next couple of years that we don't have to do that, but eventually this is gonna come up. Yeah, that certain things that are really key should be taken to a more formal standard.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the question. Very good one. So the group was launched in 2022, officially beginning of 2022. So we are only in year 3, halfway through year 3. So what do we have? We have a canonical token list standard. So that's an official OASIS standard draft with one active implementation linear and also an EIP and draft status. And then we have an EVM-based address aliasing, which is again an official OASIS staff and EIP and draft status. And then we have an L2 transaction fee standard. That is an official OASIS standard draft and an EIP and draft status. Well, actually, I have not submitted the PR yet. It's ready. I just haven't been able to submit the PR. That's why there's no link. I just haven't had the time yet. So we have like 3 fully finished standards, and we're pushing them, and we're also discussing them in the appropriate forums of the Ethereum ecosystem forums. We have a 4th one in draft where it's finished. We're just collecting approvals, and that is an L2 transaction fee API. So we have the L2 transaction fee standard, and now we've created an API spec over that. Important point to make is that any official OASIS standard draft needs 2 reference implementations to become a full standard. That's important. So there's actually needs to be adoption. In addition to that, the L2 Standards Working Group is also publishing a glossary of L2 terms in coordination with L2 Beat, based on finalized draft standards. So whatever we have from these 3, we have put them into a glossary in order to standardize on the meaning of words, which is important because when you hear the word like L2 finalization or L1 finalization, that means different things for different people. So, and actually we'll see an example of that coming up shortly. So that's for 2.5 years. That's not bad at all. What do we have in addition to that? We also have public publications and collaborations. We have 2 formal reports. There's an update on the state of L2s that was published late last year, and it's based on a previous report from 2021. I've linked those. There are 3 blogs Um, the last one, the third one, is how W3C DITs and VCs can help with Ethereum's 3 transitions. It's about to be published by the EEA. Current state of L2 bridges, that report was published in the spring of last year. L2's digital assets with residual payments was published in 22. So, so besides standards, we're also using reports and blogs. We have active collaborations with a roll call working group. So that's an L2 working group supported by the EF. We also have a loose collaboration with L2 Beat, and also we're doing cross information with the EA cross-chain interop working group, because that is relevant, directly relevant to layer 2 bridges. So yeah, so that's the scope, that's the sort of like achievement of the working group in the first 2.5 years of its existence. Let me go on. So before we go on to the current work item, which is actually L2 transaction statuses, let me pause here for a second and ask any questions so far on the work items that I described, the standards, the reports, blogs, collaboration. All right, I know it's a little dry, but you know, that's what standard work is. It's dry work. So what's our current work item that we just started? It's L2 transaction statuses. How this come up? There was a long discussion in the roll call Telegram group, and also in parallel in the L2 standards working group in context of the L2 transaction fee API, right? Because if you want to know what the if you have submitted a transaction that's running through its life cycle, you know, and you get a get and you want to see what the fees were, you also want to know what the current transaction status is. So came out, there's like really no remote agreement on what the different statuses are, what they mean, what the trust assumptions are. So the working group went ahead and drafted a minimal set of transaction statuses that we published out on the Magician's page, as well as on the RIP as an in the RIP GitHub as an issue. And we'll also see if we can. We'll also probably get a breakout session organized around that topic. So let's get right to it. So these are the statuses. Would love to get some feedback from everybody here. So, and they're like sort of like in sequence of the life cycle. So first is L2 pending. So that's an L2 transaction submitted to an L2 and waiting to be processed by a sequencer. Well, the trust assumption here is like no inclusion guarantee on the L2. Then we have L2 replaced. So an L2 transaction that was pending was replaced by another L2 transaction. Trust assumption is the same as L2 pending. L2 dropped is an L2 transaction that was removed from the L2 processing queue for whatever reason. There's no trust assumption. It's gone. So those are the first 3 statuses. Any thoughts, comments on that first set?
Hi, Andreas. Yes. So there's at least one obvious one missing there, which is like an L2 active or something. One that's, you know, a transaction that's been accepted by the L2 and is in progress.
Oh yeah, you know, these are just the first 3. There are 5 more statuses coming.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's exactly my question. Thank you.
So then there is the next one is L2 confirmed. So an L2 transaction processed by a sequencer and assigned an order in a proposed L2 block by the sequencer by applying an L2 client-specific L2 transaction ordering protocol. The trust assumption here is the L2 transaction order guarantee is based on the security guarantee of the ordering protocol. Inclusion in finalized L2 and L1 blocks is not guaranteed. Next status is L2 included, L1 pending. So an L2 transaction included in an L2 block, but not yet submitted to the L1. So the trust assumption here is the L2 inclusion guarantee is dependent on the submission guarantee of the L2 block to the L1 and L1 finalization. And then the last two, sorry, there were not five, only four. The next to last status is L2 included, L1 included. So an L2 transaction included in an L2 block submitted to the L1. The trust assumption here is the L2 inclusion guarantee is dependent on L1 finalization. And then the last one, and I actually didn't update it, but there's already an update to that. It should be, this is already the updated version, sorry. Is L2 finalized and L1 finalized. So an L2 transaction included in an L2 block that has been included in a finalized L1 transaction. The trust assumption here is that the L2 transaction finalization guarantee is equivalent to an L1 transaction finalization guarantee in a finalized L1 block. So looking at these 7 statuses, anything that's missing, anything in the definitions that should be changed, anything in the trust assumptions that's not clear.
So it seems to me that depending on the L1 you're talking about, L1 finalized can be a pretty fuzzy concept. It can be statistically finalized. And
yes,
so different L2s are going to have different definitions or different opinions about when it reaches that final state. Has there been discussion around that?
You mean, well, I mean, so when they're considering the an L2 transaction safe, in terms of whether they would allow another transaction to work on the state that was created, that was updated by that transaction. Well, yeah, so you have, certain L2s will submit L2 blocks at very different times or at very different frequencies. Some do it every couple of minutes, some do it like every 2 or 3 hours, right? Depending on for like ZK EVMs, they're doing it at least now like hour and a half, 2 hours or something like that. Sometimes even less frequent. But they're not opining on the L1 finalization. They're taking as given by what the L1 is being called finalized, right? So Ethereum
that's not right. That's not right. They're making a judgment themselves whether the L1 state is finalized, and different L2s will have their own opinions about when that occurs.
Well,
there is no place you can go on an L1 and say this L1 thinks this state is finalized. That's generally not how it works.
Well, in Ethereum, that's you actually have finality in the
in Ethereum POS, you're trying to say, after after 2 blocks, it's locked in. It's
you're locked in, exactly.
101% finalized. Takes 12 minutes though, but still.
Yeah,
So,
it takes 12 minutes. So it all depends. They're making a judgment call as to the probability of a reorg occurring, and then having to an L1 reorg occurring, and then having to resubmit the L2 transaction.
yeah.
Right? They're not going to like wipe out the L2 state.
Yeah.
Right? They're just if there's an L1 reorg, unless there's an L1 reorg that impacts the L2 because there are exits or their withdrawals or deposits. Right? I mean, then obviously you're rolling then you're rolling the bridge contract. You need to roll the bridge contract back.
Yeah.
Right. So otherwise, yes, of course, it is all depends on what finalized means for a given L1, whether that's probabilistic, or deterministic, right? So
Well, that's why I said it depends on the L1, but on any L1 where an L2 has to make a judgment call, different L2s are going to have different levels of comfort, right? Due to their implementations. So I wonder what the practical use of these transaction statuses would be. Even if they comply with the standard, they're going to interpret it differently. So what's the value of these transaction statuses? I agree you could standardize them. I just don't know how it helps one L2 talk to or interact with another L2.
No, this is about that there is consistent. It's about for wallets and end users, right? So that there's at least a consistent set of words that are being used. Do they have to be contextualized within the L2 and the L1 use? Yes. Right, but at least you have a you don't have like three different sentences describing the same thing. Right.
Okay,
that is super confusing. What is indeed true and what hasn't been done yet and what is the next thing is actually to give a definition of finalization and then categorization of the different L1s, what finalized means.
Yeah.
Right. So once you create a definition of finalization on an L1, you then need to categorize the L1s.
So I assume that this standard is really just targeting having Ethereum as the L1, isn't it? Or is it more broad?
Yes, because the L2 working group is only targeting EVM compatible chains.
Yeah, all right, makes sense. So there is a state that I don't think is covered by your statuses. So some L2s, rather than posting all their transactions to Ethereum, post their transactions to a data availability layer like Celestia or EigenDA, and then they get a DA certificate which they then post to Ethereum. And so you could imagine when you've posted the transactions to the DA, but the DA certificate hasn't hit L1, you can't really say your L1 included. So your L2 included, but your L2 included, and now it's hit the DA. So if, and it depends on how you are going to derive your chain if L2 blows up. Whether you're going to use what's on Ethereum, the DA certificates on Ethereum, plus you're going to try and use some of the information in the DA for that, say, 1 hour between when the DA certificate was last posted and when, you know, the information that's been posted to the DA in the meantime. So, you know, it depends on how the chain does its derivation as to whether posting to the DA but not having the DA certificate on Ethereum is helpful or not. Because if you're only ever going to derive L2 state from the L1 contract based on the DA certificates, then knowing something's in the DA doesn't really help you.
Right. It's you know, it's basically, you know, where you store the you know, full-fledged L2 transaction is in the end depends on is implementation specific, right? Some use, you know, post them into blobs, other use, you know, it's like you know, a data availability layer. So, and there or combination, right? They're posting them as blobs, and then they're also running a node, a consensus node, and then keep that do not discard the blob data and keeping it as an archive node, right? So there are different types of implementations how you achieve data availability. I think this is all sort of like subsumed in L2 included, L1 pending. That becomes then sort of like, you need to say, for this L2 implements the status L2 included the following way, or L2 included L1 pending the following way, right? What's the specific implementation? What does that mean, right? So an L2 transaction included an L2 block, but not yet submitted to the L1, right? It could be, okay, has been posted to the DA. We have to wait for the DA certificate, and then we're posting that as a transaction to the L1, right? Or it's a blob. Transaction, right? So there is a need for a bit of fuzziness, like in the statuses, in order to not, and that's always a fine line that standards need to walk, to be not too opinionated about specific implementation, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, that does make sense. Otherwise, it's not a standard. It's just a specification of a product. So
exactly. So it's like, you know, what you described falls in that fairly large bucket of L2 included, L1 pending. There's like all kinds of like nuance there, right? That is really implementation specific.
Yep, sounds good.
Any more comments, questions? So I just wanted to give at the end a couple of reference points. So we have a GitHub repo, the link's there. We also have a Slack, that's the invite link. So if you click on that, you can sign up to our Slack. We have regular meetings every 2 weeks at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, 1500 hours GMT. Also posted the Zoom link. Next meeting is July 24th. You can always reach me on email, or Telegram, or an X. Email and Telegram preferred. Yeah, that's it so far. Any more questions, comments?
Not from me, because I've already asked my question or two. But from the floor, we have some people here. But yeah, I mean, I think just the idea that there's a standards group, you know, and in OASIS looking at this stuff. So it's not just say the EIP or RIP process, but something that I think big companies are likely to be able to listen to, and like ticks their boxes is very interesting all by itself. Yeah. Okay. Why don't you flick to the next slide then? And I'll quickly present. So we've got a merch store, which is open, still selling t-shirts. And the next slide. Okay. We have two talks coming up. One is Lecky, who's going to talk about Uniswap v4, and another one is by David Highland Wood, and he is going to be talking about AI and Web3. And both talks should be really good. I mean, just like this one here. And I don't know, there's a last slide which essentially tells you how to so if you're here today, there's a YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a Slack invitation link to join the conversation. And then there's the link to meetup.com. All right. So Andreas, thank you very much for your time today. And before you run away, are there any final questions?
Yeah, anything you want to ask me, it's totally fine.
I've got a question actually, which is not related to the standardization and is not what's your favorite color or anything like that, but Tree Trunk. It was a great project, showed great promise. Where is it now? What happened?
We launched on June 19th, 2022.
Okay.
That should, it was into the
Tough.
teeth of the crypto winter.
Yeah. Tough time. Tough time.
It was the timing sucked. If we had had the idea 3 months earlier, we would have been okay. We would have been probably somewhat okay. We would
Yeah.
have had enough investment to keep on going and finish what we wanted. Because one of the things that we're about to launch was an NFT having its own website where you can embed into any other website, and you had the full functionality to actually buy that NFT if it was for sale.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a real pity. When you've got great tech, but then it's timing is everything with startups.
Startups, timing is everything. It was just not, and also it was one of the other problems we had was that we could not go to UGC, so user generated content.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just not enough time between when we had to launch to where we could guarantee that you wouldn't post create NFTs with pedophilia or Nazi symbolism or things like that.
Yeah. All that sort of, yeah. All right. Well, look, Andreas, thank you for your time today. Have a great day, and everyone, see you in another couple of weeks.
Thank you. This is actually, I'm always enjoying the recordings.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, thank you. Yeah, we always try to find speakers who've got, like yourself, who've got great content to share. So
yeah. And one thing that I totally found, which I love, is it's like I'm not the greatest developer, but using like GitHub Copilot and Find, I have been able to build an entire smart ERP module on a smart contract system using the Diamond architecture in less than 4 weeks.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, with it was you know, with something that has actually passed through, you know, the dilly fuzzer without problems.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that was like I was actually surprised. So
Yeah. All right. Talk later. Bye-bye.
talk later. Cheers. Bye.